It is the year 878, on a cold, windy spring afternoon in southern England, and the fate of an entire kingdom hangs in the balance. King Alfred of Wessex has reigned for 7 years, and found himself unable to drive the Vikings from his realm. When the Danish warlord Guthrum ambushed him at Chippenham, he fled for his life to the Somerset Marshes. It appeared that the last surviving English kingdom, Wessex, was finally lost to the Vikings. But now, after several months, Alfred had re-emerged from the marshes, gathering his forces in the west. He stood at the head of a vast army from Somerset, Wiltshire and Hampshire to put an end to Guthrum's ambitions once and for all. The Battle of Edington was about to begin. This video is sponsored by you. Unfortunately, the YouTube environment is not great right now, with the algorithm being friendlier to drama and react channels and YouTube being permissive of AI slop. We don't do drama and we don't do AI, but thanks to our members and patrons, our channel continues to make 3 public videos per week, with the team intact and going strong. In recognition of their generosity and contributions, members and patrons receive 2 additional exclusive videos each week, and access many other perks. Join them to watch more than 250 exclusive videos covering every era of history by pressing the join button under the video or the links in the description and pinned comment. In April 871, Alfred succeeded his brother Aethelred as the new King of Wessex. The West Saxons had already suffered several defeats at the hands of the Norsemen in battle, and after Alfred failed again at the Battle of Wilton, he paid their leader, Halfdan, to withdraw from Wessex. Halfdan led his army back up the River Thames in the autumn. Crossing from the Kingdom of Wessex into Mercia, he captured the great trading hub of London. The wealthy town was a prize worth keeping. However, in 872, messengers from the north brought bad news for Halfdan. The Northumbrians were rebelling against Viking rule. Their vassal king, Ecgbert, had been deposed at Bamborough, and Archbishop Wulfstan had been driven from his seat at York for collaborating with the invaders. So when King Burgred of Mercia offered to pay Halfdan to leave his kingdom, the Viking leader quickly accepted and rode north with his army. He arrived in 873, striking York first, before securing the surrounding countryside. Yet the northern reaches of the kingdom, centred on the coastal fortress of Bamborough, would remain in the hands of the Northumbrians. Halfdan then moved his army to a new camp at Torksey, Lincolnshire, in the far northeast of the Mercian kingdom. From here, he could defend both York and East Anglia. He also extracted a 3rd Danegeld peace payment from Burgred, in return for not attacking the Mercian kingdom. Burgred now, on 2 occasions, had not even put up a fight against the Vikings, and to Halfdan this was a great show of weakness. So, the following year, in 874, he went back on his word and struck a lethal blow at the heart of the Mercian kingdom. He sailed down the River Trent, capturing Repton. As the burial site of several Mercian kings, it was an essential royal centre for the Mercians. Yet King Burgred was caught off guard and unable to raise an army large enough to repel the invaders. The attack demonstrated Burgred's inability to defend his subjects, and he quickly lost the support of his nobles, who were unwilling to pay a 4th Danegeld. Observing the fate of Edmund of East Anglia and the Northumbrian kings, who fought against the Vikings and died, Burgred decided to abdicate his throne. He fled across the Channel and spent his final days in Rome. Mercia was now partitioned. Halfdan took control of its eastern half, joining up his territories in York and East Anglia, while Ceolwulf, a prince from one of the many branches of the Mercian royal family, would rule over western Mercia. It is much debated whether he was appointed by the Vikings to govern on their behalf, or supported by the ealdormen of western Mercia. He was, however, very much at the mercy of Halfdan's army. To appease the Vikings, he allowed them to pass through his kingdom and use his towns as military bases whenever they wished. Wessex now stood as the last fully independent English kingdom. After retaking York and chasing King Burgred into exile, the great Viking army split up again. Halfdan went north to rule York, gifting Yorkshire's farms and estates for his soldiers to settle upon. Guthrum, meanwhile, took charge of the Vikings' southern affairs from his fortress at Cambridge. He would lead the war against Alfred and attempt to finally conquer the Kingdom of Wessex. he returned to Wessex in 876. Marching south, he caught the West Saxons off guard and led his army unopposed through the West Saxon heartlands. He captured Wareham on the southern coast. Here, a makeshift fortress was quickly built to guard against the incoming West Saxon attack. Alfred arrived at Wareham shortly after. Yet, remembering the failed siege at Reading, he was more cautious this time. Rather than attacking the fortress, he offered a Danegeld payment to secure Guthrum's departure from Wessex. While Guthrum was safe behind his walls, he was surrounded by the West Saxons and would soon run out of food, so he accepted Alfred's offer. However, this was merely a deception and part of Guthrum's broader plan. He had already secretly sent messengers to his followers in East Anglia. They were ordered to sail around Kent, along Wessex's southern coast, and join his army in the west. On the night the peace was agreed, Guthrum's army abandoned Wareham. Riding westward, they crossed into Devon and captured the coastal town of Exeter. Expecting his fleet to join him, this would be the rallying point for a vast army. And yet, Guthrum's fleet never arrived. During their journey, the Viking fleet was hit by a storm off the coast of Dorset. It sank 120 ships, bringing Guthrum's campaign to an end. Once again, he was stranded in southern Wessex. He was soon surrounded by Alfred's army, and without the support of his fleet, he was forced to sue for peace. Guthrum agreed to leave Wessex and marched north into Mercia. He would station himself at Gloucester, in the south of Ceolwulf's kingdom. As 877 drew to a close, Alfred withdrew to Chippenham. After a year of pursuing and negotiating with Guthrum, he could finally set aside the serious duties of kingship and celebrate Christmas with his friends and family. For the Anglo-Saxons, the Christmas festivities lasted 12 days, from the 25th of December to the 6th of January. For Alfred, this meant both attending the religious rituals of Christmas at Chippenham and enjoying the festive feasting with his warriors. Yet Guthrum was once again proven untrue to his vow of peace. On the 6th of January, the final night of celebrations, under the cover of darkness, he led his army south and ambushed Alfred at Chippenham. With the English distracted, the town was easily captured. Yet somehow, amid the chaos and violence, Alfred escaped. With his family and a small troop of household warriors, he fled westward into the night. Without a standing army, or time to make defensive arrangements, Alfred now had to rush towards safety from Guthrum's army. He found refuge in the Somerset marshlands. Surrounded by swamps, marshy islands, and bogland, the large Viking army would have great difficulty chasing after him. Guthrum would have to content himself with consolidating his position in Wiltshire, raiding nearby estates and villages, and attempting to win over the local aristocracy. As in Mercia and Northumbria, some among the West Saxon nobility certainly saw this as an opportunity for self-advancement. The most prominent of these defectors was Wulfhere, Ealdorman of Wiltshire. He allied with the invaders, perhaps hoping that Guthrum would appoint him King of Wessex to govern on the Vikings' behalf. The rest of the West Saxon nobility was now leaderless. Many believed Wessex was a lost cause and fled to the continent, but most returned to their estates, hoping Guthrum would leave them alone and praying for Alfred's return. Still fearing Guthrum's army, Alfred would remain in the Somerset marshes for several months. It is this setting, a defeated wandering king seeking refuge in these idyllic, peaceful wetlands, that gave rise to several myths about Alfred. The most famous of these records the king travelling alone through the marshes, disguising himself as an ordinary man for his own safety, when he was offered refuge at the home of a swineherd. While his host was out working in the field, his wife assigned Alfred several household chores, including watching over the cakes she was baking. Yet the king was lost in his own thoughts, dwelling on his failings as a king. Having lost track of time, the cakes burned. The swineherd's wife furiously rebuked Alfred, telling him, "Look here, man, you hesitate to turn the loaves which you see to be burning. Yet you're quite happy to eat them when they come warm from the oven." Rather than revealing his true identity, Alfred humbly apologized and helped the woman with her baking. First recorded more than a century after Alfred's time in the marshes, the story is probably not true, yet it shows that future generations remembered the king for his humility. In reality, Alfred likely spent most of his time hunting and fishing for food, caring for his family, and writing to local landowners to secure their support. Yet things were about to get much worse for Alfred. To the west, another Viking fleet was active in southwest Wales. Ubbe, the brother of Ivar and Halfdan, had been raiding the kingdoms of Dyfed. Now, perhaps in alliance with Guthrum, he crossed the Bristol Channel. With 23 ships and 1,200 warriors, Ubbe landed on the northern coast of Devon. From here, he hoped to trap Alfred between himself in the west and Guthrum to the east. However, the local nobleman, Ealdorman Odder of Devon, remained loyal to Alfred. He gathered a small army at Countisbury and fought with Ubbe's forces. During the battle, Ubbe's famous Raven banner was captured, and the Viking leader was killed in the fighting. 800 of the invaders died with him, and a small group of survivors fled to their ships. This victory gave Alfred and the West Saxons hope that they could finally begin to fight back. As winter turned to spring, Aethelnoth, Ealdorman of Somerset, arrived to his aid in the Marshes. He provided troops, supplies, and knowledge of the local landscape. By Easter 878, they had built a fortress on an island in the Marshes, known as Athelney, meaning the Isle of the Princes. This would serve as their base of operations for the first stage of the fightback. Alfred did not yet have the numbers to confront Guthrum directly. Instead, he began to wage a guerrilla war. Leading small groups of Somerset warriors, Alfred would disrupt Viking supply lines, ambush small raiding parties, and plunder the estates of the West Saxons who had sided with Guthrum. With each attack, he let it be known that the king still lived and still expected loyalty from his subjects. By the beginning of May, he was confident enough to finally leave the safety of the marshland. With a small but growing army, he began marching east towards the Vikings. He sent messengers to landowners in Hampshire, Somerset, and Wiltshire, demanding that every man capable of bearing arms join his army. The rallying point on the Somerset-Wiltshire border was Ecgbert's Stone, a monument built to honour Alfred's grandfather, King Ecgbert, and a reminder of his own lineage. A contemporary biographer of the king, Bishop Asser, described the reaction of the West Saxon soldiers upon Alfred's arrival. When they saw the king, receiving him as if one restored to life after suffering great tribulations, they were filled with immense joy. Now supported by the armies of Hampshire, Somerset, and Wiltshire, many of which had abandoned their traitorous lord, Wulfhere, Alfred was ready to face the Vikings. Guthrum, meanwhile, left Chippenham to meet Alfred's army. Both leaders knew this would be a single decisive battle to decide who would rule Wessex. The next day, Alfred continued his march east, crossing into Wiltshire, and set up camp near the village of Warminster. Alfred's scouts had informed him of how close the Vikings were. He now knew that tomorrow he would fight for the survival of his kingdom. The army awoke at dawn and continued its march. After several hours, they spotted Guthrum's banners near the royal estate of Edington. It had been 7 years since the fateful year of 871, when Guthrum arrived in England and Alfred had become king. The two men would now, for the first time, fight one another as the sole leaders of their armies. We know little about the size of each army, though it is estimated that they were similar in size, perhaps between 2,000 and 3,000. As the two sides drew closer, they formed their ranks, preparing for the battle. Alfred ordered his army to form a shield wall, a long line of shields locked together. As they slowly moved towards one another, they exchanged war chants, insulting their enemies and calling on their gods for aid. When they came within range, arrows and javelins flew between the two sides, lodging themselves into shields, armor, and flesh. Then came the final push, as the two front lines clashed. The Viking army hurled itself against the West Saxon shield wall. Armed with axes, swords, and spears, they hacked, jabbed, and slashed, trying to smash shields and find gaps in the wall. Alfred fought bravely on the front lines, as expected of an Anglo-Saxon leader. The battle continued late into the day, with both sides sustaining heavy losses. Only after several hours of fighting did the discipline of Alfred's shield wall prevail over the Viking army. Unable to break through, and with casualties mounting, Guthrum ordered a full retreat. He led his warriors northward to his base at Chippenham. but the town was 15 miles from Edington, and his army was pursued all the way into the night by Alfred's troops. Guthrum was safe at Chippenham for the time being, but Alfred swiftly followed him, killing the soldiers, horses and cattle he found outside the town's walls. Chippenham was surrounded by the River Avon on 3 sides. As Alfred set up his camp to the south, just outside Chippenham's front gates, there was now no way out for Guthrum. His supplies were dwindling, he was cut off from his allies to the north and completely isolated. Alfred did not need to attack Chippenham's walls. He would patiently wait for Guthrum's food to run out. And thus, after 2 weeks, Guthrum sent a messenger to the West Saxon camp. He begged Alfred to allow him and his men to leave Wessex, promising never to return. Alfred had won, but he now had to decide what to do with his defeated foe. Guthrum had already broken peace treaties twice, so he was not a man Alfred could trust. In Alfred's view, Guthrum's deceitfulness derived directly from his pagan beliefs. Thus, there was only one solution that would allow him to trust his opponent's promise of peace. Thus, he offered to let Guthrum live and return to the Viking-settled lands in the east on condition that he renounce the pagan gods Odin, Thor and Freya and convert to Christianity. Only then, as a fellow Christian prince, could Alfred trust him to keep the peace with Wessex. With no alternative, Guthrum agreed. 3 weeks later, the two leaders rode west, back toward the Somerset marshlands. Alfred had chosen a church in the village of Alla, near Athelney, for the baptism. This was perhaps where Alfred had prayed during his exile, and it was a symbolic reminder of the events of the previous months. In early April, Guthrum entered the small church, packed with the nobles of Wessex, who had come gleefully to witness his surrender to their faith. Leading a troop of his 30 most trusted advisors and generals, who were to join their ruler's new faith, Guthrum approached the altar, kneeling at the feet of the church's priest, who was flanked by King Alfred and Ealdorman Aethelnoth. Guthrum affirmed that he renounced the devil and all his works, and declared his belief in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The priest then sprinkled holy water across his forehead and dressed him in a white robe as he rose, a sign of his newly found Christian purity. Alfred stood as Guthrum's godfather, a symbol of both his friendship with and superiority over his former enemy. To mark his transformation from a pagan warlord to a Christian king, he was given a new name, Aethelstan. The party of West Saxons and Danes then travelled to the village of Wedmore. Here, Alfred and Guthrum feasted together, exchanged gifts, and agreed on the final terms of a new peace treaty, known as the Treaty of Wedmore. Guthrum then collected his army at Chippenham and moved north of the West Saxon border, first to Cirencester and then the following year east to East Anglia, where he would rule as king. It is questionable how seriously Guthrum took his conversion. He did, after all, have no choice if he wished to live. However, the coins he minted as King of East Anglia bore the name Aethelstan rather than Guthrum. This suggests that, even when he was far beyond Alfred's reach, he continued to present himself publicly as a Christian. He and Alfred would work to maintain this imperfect peace as best they could for the following decade, and their close diplomatic relations continued until Guthrum's death in 890. Alfred had saved Wessex. Had he been defeated at Edington, the last English kingdom would almost certainly have fallen. But he could now look to the future, and was determined to ensure that something like this could never happen again. In our next episode, we will look at how Alfred reformed Wessex's defences, expanded his influence beyond his kingdom's borders, and dealt with future Viking attacks. If you don't want to miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member-exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.